Hello and welcome to SAS TV. This week we're going to talk about the importance of having a great relationship with your business figures. As business owners, we all recognise that a successful business is all about successful relationships. Relationships with your customers and clients, relationships with the suppliers, and also relationships with the people who support you. But actually, what is the most important relationship for any successful business is the one with your business figures. So this time I'm going to use the help of Bill Ben to illustrate the point that I'm trying to make. So let me introduce you to them. So this is Bill and this is Ben. As you can imagine, they both run landscaping and gardening businesses, and they're both just as successful. Well, no, that's not true. They're not as successful as each other, but they're both just as passionate about what they do, and they both work just as hard as each other. They both started off in business feeling exactly the same about their figures and in terms of their confidence in being able to read their numbers and use them in their business as they go along. But they both chose very different routes of how to use their numbers to make good decisions. So I first want to talk about Bill. Now Bill, like a lot of business owners, feels very strongly or feels that his business figures are actually important for producing the statutory accounts every year, so that he knows how much tax he needs to pay. He doesn't really see how powerful they actually are, and actually he's not that confident about it anyway. He doesn't have a great relationship with his numbers, and he doesn't really have a good relationship with his accountant either. The accountant doesn't really know what Bill's goals and ambitions are for his business, and the accountant doesn't really understand what Bill's trying to achieve. Anyway, what Bill does know is that he does have to look at what his numbers are saying, and he does recognise that he needs to set himself some targets and things for his business. So what he does is he decides to set up a target for his revenues. Now, Bill decides to just concentrate on revenues, but it's also very important, although he doesn't really recognise it, that he needs to concentrate on what his gross profits are as well. Your gross profit, as you probably already know, is the revenue minus the cost of delivering whatever it is you're selling, whether it's a product or a service, and what's left is your gross profit. And using your gross profit, you then pay for all your fixed costs that are there, regardless as to whether you're selling or not. What's left, you use to pay your tax, and you then take it out as extra dividends and to be able to live your life the way you want to. So, as I said, Bill does only concentrate on his revenue targets, and he decides the best way for him to track it is as a straight line graph that goes like that. Bill's company is called Bill and Hope, by the way. His numbers go down here, and the months of the year along the bottom there. And he starts off his year tracking how he's doing against his targets. So, January, on target, great. February, yeah, another good month. And March, perfect. Everything's going really, really well. So Bill sort of takes his eye off the ball in terms of what's going on with his revenue targets. And as I say, he doesn't really have a look at what his gross profit targets are going to be. And he also runs his business, quite a lot of it, by gut feel. He does have a look at his bank statement every week, every day, and feels that as long as it's within the black, or in the black, or within his overdraft limit, then that's fine. That's all he needs to think about. He doesn't really have a view of what his cash flow would be looking like. And as I say, this is really the only bit of relationship that he has with his business figures. So what he does is he starts it off and it's all fine, and he starts looking at it. And as his year progresses, his customers don't pay quite as regularly as they normally do, or quite as on time as they normally do. And actually the customers that just come in to buy the garden items, the plants as well as the furniture and things like that he's got, they start spending a bit less money. So Bill decides that actually what he's going to do, because he doesn't really have anybody to talk to, he doesn't have a good relationship with his accountant, he can't, and he also knows that if he phones the accountant, that's going to cost him. So he makes the decision to cut prices, because that's a simple thing to do. And of course by doing that, it means that he's squeezing the amount of gross profit that he has after selling his services and his products, and that has an impact on his cash flow. But what he recognises as well that happens across that year is that the cash flow squeeze and the gross profit squeeze is happening for his suppliers as well. So Bill is in a very uncomfortable position where he's having to dip into his own personal funds because his bank manager is giving a bit of hassle, because he keeps going and using up a bit more and a bit more of his overdraft. They don't like the way that's going. And his wife doesn't really like it either, because he's going into his personal funds to be able to look after the business. Now, that's fine, but Bill then doesn't have any time to look at how to get himself out of the situation that he's in. He has no time to work on the business. He's spending his whole time working in the business. And he's getting a lot of hassle a lot of the time. And as I say, he's just fighting fires the whole time, moving money from one pot to the back to the another pot and then back again, and he's quite exhausted. The things do pick up towards the end of the year. And he then decides he should track what's going on again. So he goes and has a look back on his graph, and come October, November, December time, he is making more sales, but he hasn't actually achieved his revenue targets. And as I said earlier, he doesn't even track his gross profit targets. So he knows that he hasn't made enough revenue, he knows that he's put prices down, so therefore there's no way he's actually been able to cover all of his fixed costs easily. He knows that. So what he does at the end of his year is he goes to his accountant with his shoebox full of his sales invoices and his purchase invoices and his bank statements and his VAT reconciliations, and he takes his shoebox with all that information in it and gives it to his accountant in good faith that the accountant will work its magic and that Bill will pay as little tax as possible, but he doesn't really know what else to expect. He does go to see his accountant on the annual basis, and the accountant goes through the profit and loss and the balance sheet. And Bill doesn't really understand all of it. And because he doesn't really understand all of it, and because he doesn't have a great relationship with his accountant, he doesn't feel confident enough to be able to say, actually, can you explain what that means? You know, on my balance sheet particularly, what does my director's loan, what's that made up of? What are the accruals about? And because he doesn't feel confident, he decides that, you know, he walks away only really knowing how much profit he's made and how much tax he's got to pay on that profit, but not really a lot else. So he spends his year feeling, or he ends his year rather, just hoping that and knowing that next year has got to be different. He knows it's got to be different, but he doesn't really know how it's going to be different, but he knows he just can't have another year like the one he's just had. So that's Bill. Now I would like to talk about Ben. There's Ben. Now Ben, as I said at the beginning, he runs a very similar business, landscape gardening, and all the services provided around that, as same as Bill. He's just as passionate about what he does, and he's just as good. And at the beginning of when he first started his business, Ben wasn't that comfortable with numbers, but he recognised that that is the key to having a successful business, is understanding what your numbers are saying and having a great relationship with them. He also recognised that he needed to have good, solid advice from a good, solid accountant who could actually explain the numbers the way Ben wanted to be able to see it, and guide him and be there as a sounding board and be part of his team. So Ben starts his year having very clear goals and ambitions for his business, and one of them is that he decides that he wants to go for the big ticket sales with local schools and authorities, because obviously they'll spend a lot more money. But with that, there's quite a long lead time because it's a big ticket item. There's a few more hoops to go through, but he's confident that it will happen for him. So he puts that as part of his plan. He also has some very, because he does recognise that when that business comes in, you know, he's got additional expenses and things, so he puts all of that in his cash flow. And he has a living cash flow that accurately forecasts where his money's coming in from and what he needs to be spending it on, and when he's receiving the money as well as when he needs to pay for things. He also has the recognition that it's not just the revenue figures that he needs to have targets on, but also his gross profit figures. And he decides that he's quite a visual person, but he needs to be able to see things differently to how Bill looks at his. Oh, I forgot to say, Ben's company is called Ben and Fit. Anyway, so this is Ben's graph. Similar to Bill's, there's the numbers along here and the months of the year along the bottom there. And Ben prefers to be able to see his targets on a straight line basis. But he likes seeing, he's more of a visual guy. So he's got these purpley, light purple bars are his monthly targets. The darker sort of maroony colour red bars are what he's actually been able to achieve against his targets for every month. Now, as you can see, Ben starts off his year not that brilliantly, and he recognises that he needs to do something now. Oh, and he's got one of these for his revenue as well as for his gross profit targets, so he's watching both. So he recognises actually there's potentially a problem here, and if he carries on that way, he'll never achieve any of his targets. So what he does is he picks up the phone and he speaks to his accountant to just bounce off some ideas, get some advice, and the accountant suggests that actually, let's have a look to see who's already spending money with you. Look at your historical information, because that's really important too, as well as the information about the future. This is showing him where he's going in the future, but the historical information is also very powerful. So after the discussion with his accountant, Ben decides that he should do a pie chart, which looks like this. And this is actually a pie chart showing him his spread of clients. So as you can see, the garden centres take up a majority of it. You've got your nurseries and landscape gardeners, and the smallest slice of the pie is with schools and local authorities. Now, if you remember at the beginning, that was who Ben was going to target. He was going to target them, but of course the lead time he's got to take into consideration, and he doesn't have that time, and knowing that, you know, he needs to be able to make some sales now. So looking at the information he's got, he knows who's already spending, he knows how many times they spend and their average spend. So he's got some really good information to then target his marketing. So that's what he does, and you would have seen this from before. He's actually been able, with his team, to be able to increase sales in the second half of his year. So actually they've gone over target by a significant amount. So overall, the business has achieved, in fact overachieved, both their revenue targets and their gross profit targets. So Ben has spent his year being able to make timely, proactive and informed decisions as his year has gone along, but using his numbers to guide him into all the other activities that help him to make the money. So he's a happy boy. What I did when I met Bill and Ben for the first time was I asked them these 5 questions. So you watching this at your desks or you're at home, think about how you might answer these questions, and it'll be quite interesting, I think. So my first question is, would your accountant be able to explain your business to someone else? Does your accountant know what the goals and ambitions for your business are? Does your accountant explain your business figures in a way that makes sense to you? Do you regularly look at your business figures and use them to make proactive and informed decisions? And finally, do you have a great relationship with your business figures? Be interesting to find out how you answered those. Now, Bill said yes to a couple of them, and Ben said yes to all of them, which is great. So, to summarise, Bill, very, very good at what he does, really, really passionate, doesn't feel like he has that much confidence with his numbers. He's had a really, really hard year. Really knows that he doesn't want to have another year like that, but doesn't really know how to make it different, and spends his whole year fighting fires and just is exhausted. And the only thing that he's got time for at the end of the day is weed. There you go. Ben, however, just as passionate as Bill, works just as hard as Bill, but he made himself have a great relationship with his numbers. He made it so that he was able to make proactive, timely and informed decisions and felt in control the whole year. He had a great year, and he had loads of energy to go off in his white convertible with his beautiful flower girl, and he enjoyed himself running the business as well as out of the business. So my question to you is, Bill and Ben, which one are you and which one would you rather be? I'll see you next time. Bye!